Hey guys, it's Alex. I'm here with another series review. I read Ginny Han's trilogy, To All the Boys I've Loved Before, P.S. I Still Love You, and Always and Forever Lara Jean. Like with my other series reviews, I say series reviews like I've done plural, but I'm going to try to keep it spoiler-free. It's just harder with this one because even talking about the characters that are in this book as the series goes along is vaguely spoilery. I won't talk about like any of the major plot devices or anything that have happened, but if you are very wary of spoilers and you don't want to know anything going into a book, A, you probably shouldn't be watching reviews, and B, I might, for the later books, they might spoil a few things about the earlier book, but I'm going to try to keep my spoilers to a minimum as much as I can. The first book of the series was To All the Boys I've Loved Before, in which we were introduced to 16-year-old Lara Jean as her sister Margot is going off to college, and Lara Jean has crushes on boys. A lot. And as most teenagers do, they get crushes. And she writes letters to the boys she has crushes on when she's ready to be done with the crush. Like, the letter is her goodbye. And she keeps all the letters stored away in a hat box given to her by her mother. And at one point, the letters get mailed out to all these boys. And one of them is her sister's ex-boyfriend. So it sort of turns into her faking a relationship with another boy so that her sister's ex-boyfriend doesn't actually realize that she still has a crush on him. And the drama sort of ensues from there. I didn't like this book. I thought Lara Jean was one of the most annoying characters I have ever read in fiction. I thought she was in middle school when this book started. I was a couple chapters in, I think, and I was thinking to myself that I don't know how this got shelved as young adult because this was definitely middle grade fiction. And then she mentioned she was only 2 years younger than her 18-year-old sister. I legitimately thought she was a 12-year-old. She read like a 12-year-old, like maybe 13 if she's an immature 13-year-old. But I thought she was closer in age to her younger sister Kitty, who was 9, than her older sister Margot, who was 18. Her voice was very, very young. She was very immature. She didn't really have to deal with the consequences of, like, things that happened. At one point, when her sister goes off to college, she leaves her car behind. And Lara Jean gets in a car accident within about 10 minutes of driving it for the first time. And, like, nothing really happens. Like, she totals the car, and everyone says, like, well, as long as you're fine. And then cute boys give her rides everywhere that she needs to go. And, I don't know, that bugged me. And it's not just that scenario bugged me. It's that was the way everything that went wrong for her was treated. Like, she would screw something up, and then, oh, look, cute boy is along, and he'll fix it, or he'll help, or things will be fine, and there will be a cute boy when it is. And that bugged me. All the characters in this bugged me. Like, I hated Margot. Margot was just this insufferable, controlling know-it-all. And I hated Josh, who was just irritating, and I hated Josh. And Chris seemed like a caricature of a human being rather than an actual real person with emotions. And Chris was a girl. Chris was Lara Jean's best friend. And the only person I actually liked in this entire book was Peter. And I wound up giving this book 3 stars. I don't even know if it deserved 3 stars. Like, as I'm looking back on it, that was quite a generous rating. I gave it 3 stars solely because of how much I enjoyed Peter. And I don't even think I loved him that much as a person, as a character. I just think everyone else was so annoying. And he just stood out because he was the only one I found tolerable or enjoyable. And I could probably give this 2 stars and it'd still be accurate. But I did give it 3 stars. I wouldn't recommend it though. It was I thought it was maybe the best book of the series, but other than that, that was a very low standard for me. The second book was P.S. I Still Love You. In this book, one of the boys who did not respond to her letter earlier in the first book, she got all the letters back. As she was like getting the letters back, one boy, she never heard from one boy, and in this book, John Ambrose shows up, and there's a love triangle between her and Peter and John Ambrose, and I didn't like Peter in this book, so that pretty much like destroyed everything that I enjoyed from the first one. This just, it didn't need to exist. When I read a fluffy, contemporary young adult book, I don't mind if it's a little bit generic or if the characters aren't, fully formed or whatever. Like, it's enjoyable, and I want it to read, like, this some fun, fluffy romance and hope that they get together in the end, and then they get together in the end, and then there's this implied happily ever after. To All the Boys I've Loved Before had that, and then this was sort of like, JK, let's throw in an awkward love triangle. It was really forced, and I'm not someone who hates love triangles in essence. Like, they're fine. They can be done well, and they're not something that annoys me just by their presence. Which, I mean, if you don't like love triangles, you will absolutely hate all these books, so, like, don't even try. But this was just this awkward, forced love triangle, and then I wound up not liking the character I was supposed to be rooting for in this book. Like, he was a jerk. He treated his girlfriend horribly, and then they broke up, and I was like, good. Like, I'm not rooting for you because you're treating her badly. Like, you lie to her, you let her think she's crazy about things when you know the truth, and it just, I didn't like it. And then there was a character whose name is Genevieve, who treated Lara Jean really, really horribly and, like, did some truly terrible things to her. And in the end, it's like, oh, well, she had a hard life. You should, like, forgive her because of her hard life. And it's like, no. Like, when you do really, really bad things to people, I don't feel sorry for you in the slightest. There were a lot of inconsistencies in here. Like, John Ambrose would say at one point, my father wants me to go to UNC because that's where he went, and there's Tar Heel in our blood. And later he'd say, my parents didn't go to college. My sisters were the first in my family to go. And that was annoying. Like, little things, but little things I noticed that bugged me. I gave this book 2 stars. It was just, it didn't need to exist. Like, this honestly could have been a standalone book. And it sort of felt like she just kept writing sequels to make more money off them. And, like, forcing more plot. Because the whole love triangle in this was just super awkward and forced and miserable. The third book in the series, the third and final book, and it does say the conclusion on the cover, was Always and Forever Lara Jean. She and Peter get into college and, like, they have a plan where they're going to be happily ever after and go to UVA together because that's where they both want to go. And he gets in and she's just, waiting for her acceptance letter because they're seniors by this point. And she winds up not getting into UVA, which isn't a spoiler because that happens fairly early on. And it's sort of dealing with her not knowing what to do or where she's going to go to college. And, like, she gets in other places, but she's not really happy with them. And she's dealing with, now she's going to have a long-distance relationship and so on and so forth. At least P.S. I Still Loved You had a forced and awkward plot. This didn't really have much of any plot at all. Like, there was no love triangle in this, thank God, because by the third book in the series, I was tired of love triangles every other book. And I was like, who's gonna get awkwardly shoved in now? And I didn't care. Like, I didn't care earlier because I didn't care about the characters, but I really didn't care by the time I got to this book. I was just reading it for it to be over. And even then, this probably would have been my favorite book in the series if, like, despite its pointlessness, if it hadn't been so unrelatable. Like, everything she went through in this was incredibly unrelatable to me. And part of that was personal feelings, but it was just, I couldn't relate to any of her problems. Like, she was worried, she was so upset that she got into William and Mary and that she was forced to go to William and Mary. And I was like, I would have killed in high school to even have a shot at getting into William and Mary. And, like, the whole, like, going to prom, and prom is super important, and she's, like, makes her best friend go to prom because prom is amazing, and, like, if you don't go to prom, you'll forever regret it. And, like, I don't relate to that. I didn't go to prom, and I still don't regret it. Like, and high school was like, oh, we'll always have high school. Like, these memories were so great, and, again, didn't relate to that. Like, high school was high school. We all move on, and that's pretty much what this entire book was. It was just a series of unrelatable events. But the characters did grow up a little bit by the end here. Like, she was not as annoying and immature as she was in the first book. Because they're all 18 about, and graduating from high school soon, and they were still really immature for their ages. Like, I'm not saying that, but they were less immature than they were earlier on in the series, where they were completely unbearable. And yeah, I gave this 2 stars. I didn't enjoy it. I don't really understand why it existed or why this existed as a trilogy, but it did, and I read it, so. For the series on a whole, I gave it 2 stars. I'm not quite sure on my specific ratings of the books. I know I gave the first one 3 stars, but I'm not sure it deserved that. But I feel like one of the books deserved 3 stars, and the other 2 deserved 2 stars. I don't know which ones, but that was just my feelings after reading it, which is why I left the first one at 3 stars. But I was expecting, like, cute and fluffy and generic and fun times, romancy things going on. And I was really disappointed. I really was. I didn't like this book. I didn't like the characters. I hated the characters. Peter was the only character I liked in this series, and I only liked him in the first and the third books. Like, he was awful in the second book. And I didn't like the characters in a romance novel where there wasn't much plot. It was just romance and character development, and they were all really flat and one-dimensional, and that improved a little bit by the third book. But even if the third had been like a standalone, I would still be commenting that they seemed really immature and flat and one-dimensional and annoying. It was just slight improvement as the series went along. The premise was sort of interesting in the way that it was supposed to be about, you know, she wrote a bunch of love letters to her crushes, some of them, you know, several years old from middle school. And imagine if you had a middle school letter sent out that you were in love with this boy, you know, back in 8th grade, and now you're 16. Like, that was a really interesting premise to me. But it wasn't even about that for the most part. There was no mention of those love letters at all in the third book. And in the first book, it was only sort of a thing. Like, no one was, like, reacting to the love letters. It was just the fake romance, and then her sister's boyfriend was one of the ones she wrote love letters to, and it wasn't as focused on that as I thought it would be. And I don't know, it was lots of manufactured drama when I thought it was going to be more like personal growth, and there wasn't much of that. And these books annoyed me. I honestly considered DNFing the first one 50 pages in, and the only reason I didn't was because I don't DNF books, like, ever. I'm not someone who's can do that. I get obsessive about finishing things even when I hate them 50 pages in. And I did think, like, the first 50 to 100 pages of the first book were the worst part of the entire series. Like, that was probably 1 star for me, and then, like, it improved as the series went along and got up to, you know, 2 stars, but that's still not very good. Like, on a whole, I enjoy fluffy, generic, contemporary romance, and I didn't enjoy this. So annoying. Like, I gave it 2 stars. I wouldn't recommend. I know people love these books, but they were honestly just a huge disappointment to me. Let me know down below in the comments if you've read these books, and if you disagree or agree with what I said, because, you know, these are my thoughts on the books, and other people might not find these characters annoying or immature. It's just personal opinion. And also let me know if you've read other Jenny Han books, and if you think those are better, or if you would recommend those instead of these. Because before I'd read these books, I really wanted to read Burn for Burn. And at this point in time, I'm not going to. Just because of how much I disliked this series, and I disliked her characters, and sort of, her writing was fine, but the way she wrote the characters was really annoying. But let me know if you've read Burn for Burn, or The Summer I Turned Pretty, and if you would recommend those maybe over these, if you thought they were better and you've read them both. I would really like to hear about that. Bye, guys!